It's the early morning of June the 26th, 1718, and in the basement of the Peter and Paul Fortress in St. Petersburg, Russia, lies a young man. His face is covered in bruises, his back is bleeding, and his eyes are sunken holes in their sockets, wreathed in black. The door is flung open, and another man strides into the prison chamber. In his hand is a hard leather whip, about 3.5 feet long, ending in a beak-like hook. He walks over to the prisoner, who closes his eyes and quietly sobs. He knows what's coming. The prisoner is Tsarevich Alexei, heir to the Russian throne. His torturer is his own father, Tsar Peter the Great. Peter the Great was one of the most bloody and brutal rulers in Russian history, and his son, one of thousands of people who will suffer at his hands during his reign. And yet, he is remembered as one of Russia's greatest ever rulers. His love of science and learning saw him transform his antiquated realm into a European power of the modern age. But given the high price paid by his people, can he truly be seen as Peter the Great today?
Peter the Great is a massive contradiction. On the one hand, he's this great reforming Tsar who embraces science and technology, but on the other hand, he is a brute.
He could behave like a complete barbarian. But yet at the same time, this was a man who brought Russia in line with the rest of Europe.
As a man, a disaster, appalling. As a ruler, fantastic, the greatest that there's ever been in Russia.
You're listening to Forbidden History, the podcast series that explores the past's darkest corners, sheds light on the lives of intriguing individuals, and uncovers the truth buried deep in history's most controversial legacies. I'm Janine Haroni, and this is The Strange Life of Peter the Great. It's 1682. Tsar Peter I is just 10 years old, and in the Kremlin in Moscow, he is witnessing a massacre. His older half-sister Sophia is stealing the throne from him. She has the palace guard, known as Streltsy, on her side. They throw men, women, and children onto the points of their spears and murder much of the Russian government. As he is so young, there's nothing Peter can do but flee with his mother to a village outside the capital. Sophia has won. And yet Peter is not destined to become a footnote in history. In fact, because he will grow up away from the old-fashioned traditions of the Russian court, he will become a very different kind of ruler, one willing to break with the past and transform his country. Nigel Jones is an author and former deputy editor of History Today magazine. We asked him to describe Peter's childhood.
Peter, from an early age, was not a member of the rather stiff and stilted court. He was brought up in a village to the east of the city, and he was more or less given free run. He mingled with peasants. He, from an extremely early age, got interested in things like ships and sailing. He loved outdoor sports. He loved running. He loved hunting. The wilder and the more savage, the better. He had an inquiring mind about the many discoveries, scientific and technological, that were going on in the late 17th century when he was growing up.
Peter's inquiring mind is fed by time spent in a segregated area of Moscow, where foreigners live.
They were kept separate from the mass of the Russian aristocracy, had their own suburb known as the German suburb in eastern Moscow, and Peter used to frequent there, and he in fact from quite an early age, seemed to prefer the company of these Westerners with their advanced ideas, their advanced clothing, their advanced habits and fashions, than the native, rather hidebound and conservative Russians.
Growing up away from court has given Peter the opportunity to mingle with people that few Tsars would ever have had contact with before. And these foreigners are exciting for him, because Russia itself has remained stubbornly unchanged for centuries. It's a place of long beards, short lives, and slow progress. Peter soon grows scornful of the conservative Tsarist court, and would much sooner be drinking and smoking, sailing his boat, or hanging out with these stimulating Westerners. His mother, however, is less keen on his lifestyle, and arranges for Peter to marry a Russian noblewoman called Eudoxia. But any hopes that Eudoxia would tame her unruly son are soon dashed. As author and historian Tony McMahon reveals, Peter prefers the company of a Dutch woman called Anna Mons.
Hard to imagine that Eudoxia was ever going to please Peter. I mean, she was stodgy, she was puritanical, she was terribly conservative. In contrast, along comes Anna Mons. Peter likes to drink. She's the daughter of a wine merchant. Perfect. And they can match each other drink for drink, and she's jolly good fun. So he preferred Anna.
Anna would become Peter's royal mistress. But his life away from court is not entirely carefree. As Peter comes of age, he fears that Sophia may try to eliminate him. And so, when he's 17, he decides to move first and take back power. By summer 1689, Sophia's hold on power back in Moscow has become increasingly weak. 2 disastrous military campaigns in the Crimea have damaged her reputation, and Peter sees his chance. He slowly gathers people to his cause, and eventually convinces the Streltsy, those palace guards who had once ousted him, to now pledge allegiance to him. Sophia realizes her time is up. Powerless to fight back, she renounces her place in the succession and is banished to a monastery. With Sophia out of the way, the era of Peter the Great is about to begin. But by now, Peter is so scornful of the traditional way of ruling that he sidelines the Russian court. Instead, he convenes his new dining society, the all-joking, all-drunken synod of fools and jesters. As Tony McMahon describes, alcohol takes center stage.
The rules and the regulations of the Jester Synod laid down by Peter the Great pretty much revolved around drinking. So, for example, he had a massive cup, the Great Eagle Cup, which held about a litre of vodka. He'd set kind of random tasks for members of the Synod, chop down a load of trees on a path, reward vodka. So you don't please me, your punishment is you're barred from all the taverns in Russia. But most of it was all about setting tasks and reward vodka.
The Synod is presided over by Peter's old tutor, whom he appoints as Prince Pope. Wearing a tin hat and a coat half made of gambling cards, he chairs a group that includes jesters, giants, a circus of dwarves, dancing girls, and enough alcohol to sink a battleship. The antics of the Synod reveal just how unconventional Peter is. And he's also a man with a warped sense of humor.
Peter was unusually tall for his time. He's about 6'8". And maybe that contributed to his obsession or his rather lurid interest in people with disabilities. So, for example, he got involved in the organisation of a wedding, and he thought it would be hilarious for the 4 people who were announcing the guests to be the 4 greatest stammerers in Russia. So this must have taken for ages to announce all the people who were arriving. And then the 4 footmen, who had to do lots of running around, he found 4 people with chronic gout, and massively overweight, who actually needed other people to help them doing the running around.